Okay, well, I think we will make a start. And good morning, afternoon, good night, everybody, wherever you might be in the world. It's wonderful to have such a global audience on International Women's Day. I mean, it couldn't be better to have people representing women across the world. So I'd first of all like to introduce ourselves. Beginning with myself, I am Lucilla Poston. I am the president of the International DOHaD Society. But more importantly, today I'm the head of a School of Life Course Sciences in King's College in London, and I am a professor of women's health. So my background has been in women's health for as long as I can remember, and of course I'm a manager of many staff who are many of whom, probably more than 50%, are women. And so I have quite a lot of experience in terms of equality, diversity, and inclusion. Which is something that our university is very keen to promote and actually implement in every way possible. So I'm going to now, I'll hand over to Pauline, who's already said hello to you, but just to say who she is. Pauline.
Hello, everyone. I am Pauline. I'm the Society Administrator, and I have been with the Society now for just a little over a year. My background is in business. So I'm the person who's usually behind the scenes and no one ever sees me.
No, but a very important person, may I say.
Making sure that everything goes smoothly.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Pauline is extraordinarily modest. She sort of runs the society, but there we go. And has been responsible for bringing us together today. Thank you very much, Pauline. So at the top of my screen, Fabiola, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Fabiola. I am from Brazil. I am a pediatrician, and I love to work and study the connection between the DOHaD concepts in pediatric nutrition, especially. I am professor at university too, and my focus of studies, I'm sure, is breastfeeding, perinatology situation, especially prematurity.
Yeah, very important. Very important. That's very, very close to my heart as well. Thank you very much, Fabiola. Cristiane.
So, hi, everyone. My name is Cristiane Matté. I'm from Brazil as Fabiola, but I live in the south of Brazil. I'm working in the last 13 years and in a university, a federal university here, working with exercise and also different kinds of diets in pregnancy. Actually, I work with animal models, and I have been studying the brain of the offspring. And today, for me, it's a great honor to be here with these great scientists. And I really like to thank Lucilla, Pauline, and all the DOHaD Society to be here today.
Thank you very much indeed, Cristiane. It's lovely to see you there. Then Shiao-yng Chan is next on my screen. Xiao, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good night. I'm in Singapore. I'm a clinician scientist and obstetrician. My research focuses around the placenta, lipid fluxes, and gestational diabetes. I do basic science research as well as birth cohort studies, and I run clinical trials in maternal nutrition. Right. Look forward to the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very experienced lady. Thank you. And Maria.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. So my name is Maria Ospina. I'm connected from the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe and the Nosani in Canada, but I'm originally from Colombia. I immigrated here in Canada a long time ago, and now I'm an associate professor in public health sciences at Queen's University. My area of research is on how social influences impact long-term health and the impact of social inequities on human development. I am so pleased to be here with colleagues that I have met on Twitter and that we have had those interactions. So it's really, really nice to be here, and thank you. And I'm also the secretary of DOHaD Canada. I forgot to say that.
That's quite important. That's a big role for which we are very grateful, may I say. Thank you very much indeed. So Maria, I thank you very much, and thank you everybody for those introductions. And as you say, this is not, it's not face to face, but it's not a bad alternative, is it? We can all talk to one another freely. and we're all women and we're all in it together. And so I thought what we do, we put a few suggestions together for questions, and I'll just kick off with one or two of those. What we're thinking of particularly, and I'd like to know what everybody thinks that DOHaD as a society can do for women across the world. And we are in a unique position, having 9 regional groups who are working in different corners of the globe. That we do have an influence, and we'd like to be able to extend that influence towards helping women in the workplace, women who we work with as people in clinical trials, and I think that's something very important to consider. How we respond with them, how we integrate them in our research, which is incredibly important. We spend a lot of time thinking about that. Are they co-designing research with us or not? And that's very important. We need to think of women as mothers, and women who have families, and the issues about maternity leave, about, often in a research project, we're all in research. You have a grant for research, and then somebody becomes pregnant, which is wonderful. But very often they obviously have to take a year out, perhaps, or 6 months. Then what do you do about that research project in the meantime? Whose work is it? As a manager, I've dealt with this many, many times in my career. And I think that's something that we could consider right across the different countries that you represent, how that is dealt with. So let's begin by, I think I'll just start with we're all doing research, and even though we're doing research in animals, it still involves engagement with other people. Research in women's health. So clinical trials or observational studies, many longitudinal observation studies that we do with women and their children. So I'd like to just ask the panelists, and anybody might like to chip in who wants to begin. What do you do to engage women in your communities in your research? So let's consider a given research project. This is going to be something like an observational study. Right from the start, how do you engage your intended population for that intervention or that observation? How do you engage them? So would anybody like to start?
I can start.
Fabiola, thank you. And could I just intervene 1 minute for those people listening? If you'd like to ask a question, please pop it into the Q&A section rather than the chat, and we'll keep an eye on that as we go along. Thank you very much, Fabiola. Thank you for kicking off.
I think here in Brazil, we have a national health service, it's not like NHS, but Sistema Único de Saúde, SUS. And the best, in my opinion, the best way to engagement the people is connect with public health service. It's important to family, to mother, the nursing, the children, understand the connection between the health service, public health service, and research. So if the people the people has a good idea about the health, I think it's the first step to engagement in research.
Yes, I think that's a very good point, is to understand that research is very much involved in healthcare delivery. And how would you actually do that in your center? If you have your patients in your clinic, and you're a pediatrician, but even so, if you were imagining yourself in a women's health clinic, or indeed mothers of your children, how would you actually go about that? Would you have a meeting with representatives of them, or do you just imbue that viewpoint into everything that you do? How do you actually physically or practically do that?
In a hospital, is the engagement. I think the first part is understand or know the people in the hospital, and the people and in the environment that we need to do the research, because the health professionals help me to talk with the population. It's important the nurse, the physiotherapy, the other profession understand what we need, because the research is not just for me, but for the most important part is answer questions about the service, engagement, the population, the health professional first, and after the population that we need to involve in the research.
Yeah, so it's instilling a culture amongst the health professionals. I think that is very, very important. I mean, we've often had meetings with the health professionals when we're doing a study, and multidisciplinary nutritionists, obstetricians, pediatricians, and saying, this is what we're going to be asking your patients to do. This is what we're doing. So sometimes I think having a meeting prior to a study starting so that they become involved is very important, and then they can act as the ambassadors for research as you go on. Thank you very much. Maria has a comment. Maria.
Yes, Lucilla. So this question that you made is at the core of my program of research, in fact. So is completely embedded in the research that I do. I have had the privilege to work with Indigenous people here in Canada. And that has implied a lot of work and a lot of deconstruction, also personal deconstruction about the power relationships that, we are not sometimes aware that we have as scientists, and the importance of engaging the community from the very beginning of the inception of the research question, and making a research question that is important and relevant for the community, and engaging them in different phases of the production of knowledge, right? Something that I think is very important for this engagement is trying to avoid a little bit of deficit approaches when presenting the results, when communicating the results, engaging them in the interpretation. So I think the importance of using a participatory approach in developing research is very important. But also, and this is also the results of my most recent obsession, is about how we enhance participation of diverse women in pregnancy cohorts. I don't know what are the experiences in other countries, but in Canada, we unfortunately, for many reasons that probably are related with access and other inequities, women in the cohorts that we have are usually highly educated. They belong to a specific ethnic group. Yes. They are of a high income. So we need to make a really better, we have to do better to reach out hard to reach populations and inviting them into our research, because otherwise we're producing knowledge that is excluding the huge mass of people that would benefit most, the most of our research.
So it is a massive problem about clinical studies, full stop, across the world, that you tend to recruit the well-meaning middle class, shall we say, and people who are engaged. And of course, if you're doing an intervention, a clinical trial, as I've done many times, and that clinical trial is directed towards improving inequalities in healthcare across your population, if you don't have the right population to start with, that intervention is irrelevant to your population, and therefore, in a way, you don't have to bother doing it. I mean, it is so irrelevant. So that's very often why interventions which are proven in one population, a trial population, do not replicate and are efficacious in the population as a whole when they're rolled out. And if you think about the amount of money that has been spent in research without actually ensuring that you have a representative population, it is probably one of the biggest problems in research in our area. So if we're doing interventions in nutrition in pregnancy, or interventions in physical activity like I've been doing, if you only get the motivated. I remember speaking to somebody who was a professor in London, sadly now not with us, but I was talking to her about researching in women with obesity, and she said, actually, in adult obesity outside pregnancy, we've given up with the people who are not motivated. I couldn't believe it. Well, I don't think we're giving up with the people who are not motivated. But she said, we just decided they're too hard to reach. I mean, you might as well not bother. So it is absolutely quintessential. Shao, would you like to comment? You've got a comment. Yes. Thank you very much, Maria. Yes. Very important point.
Yeah. So I think how you reach your participants depends on the funding that you have and your ethical approval. And one of the challenges that I faced is that women are not given time off work to come during the office hours, especially the lower paid workers, because if they don't go to work, they don't have an income. So we've had to adjust our study protocols to allow decentralized studies, collecting information remotely. We've had to arrange home visits,
Yes.
couriers to deliver samples, sending people out to collect biosamples, arranging weekends because children cannot take time off school. And if we want to make our research relevant to the communities, then we have to look outside our hospitals and find new ways. And of course, these methods are expensive.
Yes, I know. I've been
yeah.
there. It is absolutely the case. You have to recognize that people's time it costs money. It costs them money, whether they're actually taking time out of work or not. It costs them money. So
yes, and we need to change the culture for employers to allow women to contribute to our research, and that takes time.
But it's worth it. But it's it's worth thinking about that when designing studies, because if you think you're going to have 3 sessions a week during the week when you're going to invite people to a health and exercise class, and the people who can afford to come, who are not working, are the people who will come. And so you have to put those costs into the costs of your study. I mean, I'm just doing a study in children, and we're having all of the 9-year-old children, all of the visits during the holiday time. And we're actually going around the country with a sort of mobile unit, and we'll be taking ourselves to the children rather than the children to us. But it is quintessentially important. Rahat, you've joined us. I'm sorry, I didn't introduce you before. Would you like to introduce yourself and then give us your comment? Thank you very much. You're on mute, Rahat.
So first of all, thank you very much for this amazing opportunity to join hands with such eminent researchers and thinkers about women, around the world, around the globe. So I'm associated with the university, the Khan University in Karachi, which is a financial center of Pakistan. And the university is very heavily engaged in public health research as well as clinical research. And so I've been, so for the last 1.5 years now, I've stopped doing active obstetrics, and I'm more into teaching and into research, and dedicating my time more into these activities. And what I've done in the last 1.5 years is that I have started a lot of involvement and engagement with social media. And this is basically as a result of the research that we have done in our communities. So the challenge of research and reaching women is even more in countries where the labor force does not really contain that many women. So in Pakistan, 1 out of every 4 persons who are in the labor force are actually women, and many of these women are engaged in agricultural sector, so they may not be in the formal sector. So here, the challenge is we try and meet the challenge by having very strong national bioethics committees and institutional bioethics committees, which ensure and which try to engage with the researchers to find out how much they are going to and how they are going to engage with the people, with the women at that level. And so about 5 years ago, we had a huge rural project, public health project, which was engaging women. And so we spent about 6 months actually engaging with the women, with the stakeholders in the villages, in the centers, in the various institutions in that sector, in those villages, to try to reach women. And so you have to reach the women through the men. It's very difficult to engage directly with women.
Yeah.
And when you reach the women, it's often even if we go within the home, and which is usually the case, that in public health research we have to go within the women's homes because we are not able to draw them out into any kind of a formal situation where we can then approach them. So even if we go into their homes, the homes are structured in such a way that you're dealing with 2, 3, 4 women at one time. So that concept of privacy, confidentiality, that is very difficult to overcome in our part of the world. And so obviously this means a huge amount of resource, which is required to make that kind of an activity where you go into women's homes, you go into and you talk to them and you engage with them on a long-term basis. Then it cannot be a one-off thing. No. You have to design your programs in such a way that you have long-term engagement with certain communities and certain sectors. And so you can have this kind of relationship of trust and of engagement.
Very
so
important.
this is one aspect, really.
It's very important. I'm familiar with that. I mean, you have to be a trusted entity within their community. It is just one thing before Cristiane, just come to you about incentivization. Now that can be a difficult word, but incentives to women joining in can be very helpful. So, I mean, if I were to give an example of a very, very successful low middle income country unit, is that the research unit in the Gambia, which is run by the United Kingdom Medical Research Council. And they have a fantastic relationship with their villages, which is a very remote agricultural region. But what they do is they provide some sort of basic healthcare for the women and children and families. And you know, it's a bit of a problem that I think that's the reason why women are so compliant, is that they trust that the centre, and they know they can get some healthcare. If they need an emergency cesarean section, they will take them by ambulance to the city. But on the other hand, are you intervening in the community there with something which isn't there already? So how much can you trust the outcomes? So I don't know whether, Cristiane, just hold it on this for a moment, but I wonder if you've thought about, we pay people for their time, if we can. So if somebody spends 2 hours coming to a visit and they're happy to come, we will give them recompense for their time rather than their travel costs. So that is something that we do. But it's a difficult one. Would anybody like to comment on that? You know, should you be encouraging people with presents for their children or something in kind or whatever to encourage them to take part, or should we not do that? I think it's an important question.
So if I may, I would just like to say that in our country, actually, we are very, very, very cautious about incentivization. Our most of our research is so resource intensive that, you know, even as far as budgeting is concerned, it's not easy to incentivize. And so in the vast majority of cases, our public health researchers, we don't incentivize directly. Mm-hmm. However, because there is a practical problem of transportation for women. And so we tend to have contracts. So any kind of negotiation, any kind of incentivization has to go through the men of the community.
Yeah.
So, you know, one of the practical problems that women have and even families have is transportation, the lack of large ambulance networks. And so basically what we try to do is we try to build up this relationship with the communities, and we try to somehow or the other, so you know, we have different models in different regions depending upon the problems that they have and depending upon the local conditions. And so what we do is we try to negotiate in such a way that we don't have to pay anybody any cash direct or,
directly.
You know,
Yeah,
directly.
yeah. I think,
And,
I mean, you mentioned, Xiao mentioned going to people's homes and providing transport and so on. I think, you know, providing transport to get to a certain place and it's an indirect incentive, but it is nonetheless it's a facilitator as a part rather than a incentive. Sorry, Cristiane, you had your hand up and it's now down, but carry on. What say the comment was probably way back, but please let us know what you're going to say.
Oh, thank you. Each one of my colleagues here has so many interesting works. And I was thinking about Maria Ospina work with indigenous people, because she's from Colombia, we are from Brazil here, Fabiola and I, and we know that we have a lot of indigenous populations in Latin America, but we don't have so many studies with these people. And I'd like to know, Maria, how is work with these people? Like, if you can say to us one of your main learnings with these pregnant women or the mothers, I think it will be really nice.
Well, I think trust is the biggest thing, and be a good ally. And when I say being an ally, the fact that I work with indigenous people doesn't make me automatically an ally. They are the ones who decide if I am an ally or not. And I would say that's something that is applicable to any population that is equity seeking population, that we don't call ourselves allies until they call us as such. So this is work that has taken, I mean, for me to work with the Matté people in Alberta specifically, taking me years of getting to know each other, of building trust, of avoiding tokenism, and kind of making them the poster children to get grants and all that kind of things. That has meant also to leave my publications as in the back burner, because that's not a priority anymore. It's more important the knowledge translation to the community, the co-creation of knowledge. So it's establishing that conversation first and above everything. And it goes beyond writing a grant. It goes beyond writing a publication. Those I have a pile of work that, who knows, we probably will get papers one day, but that's not the priority. What is the priority is that with the work that we have done together, they have been able to get federal funding for a doulas program, for midwifery, indigenous midwifery, with the evidence that we have built together. So I think that's a model that, and I have some colleagues in DOHaD Canada, one of my colleagues that is not in the call today, but probably Pablo Nepomnashi. Pablo works with indigenous communities in Guatemala and also in Canada. And I think part of the success is the respectful engagement and kind of decolonizing those relationships and being very aware of our positionality when we're coming to work with indigenous people. I think I have learned from them more than they have learned from me at the end of it.
If I just, before Fabiola says, I mean, we have the same issues in England, not so much indigenous peoples, but ethnic minorities, which is the same issue, where people have very different cultural groups and completely different lifestyles and so on. I mean, one of the studies that we're doing, we're actually working with the places, the churches that they worship with, because the ministers are incredibly influential, and if they have trust in you, then their parishioners, if you like, will have trust in you too. We're working with hairdressers too, so people who they will speak to and you can engage and have trust with, and with their clients, and that is something which has been quite successful, particularly with men, with barbershops and things. So it's a different way of thinking, isn't it? But it is so important. You're not going to get anywhere unless you're communicating. Fabiola.
I'd like just to complete the idea. I think in this way, it's important you have a group with a representative ethnic distribution. For example, I think, for example, here in Brazil, we have more than 50% of the population. It's not white, it's black or brown. But in our group, in my group, I think in Cristiane group, we have a small percentage of women, black women, not white women, and can imagine indigenous woman. I think if you like, your idea is study indigenous, I think it's important to connect with doctors, indigenous doctors, or nurses. Understand? I think it's very important. Is a translation. Here for us, it's a big problem because we have a big part of population no white or black people, but in higher education until now, we don't have this percentage to is not a big diversity in our group of study, for example.
So one of the questions I have written down, and this applies to everything we might talk about this evening today, is really what can we as a society do to help with these issues? And as I mentioned at the beginning, So one thing actually from Maria, from what you said before when we were talking to US, Canada and so on, we have now created a post on our council for, well, we're calling it Equality, Diversity and Inclusion post, but it is specifically targeted at people like yourselves who are interested in working in Indigenous communities. And the idea will be, we have advertised that now, the idea will be that we have a subcommittee of members like yourselves who are interested in working in Indigenous communities who can get together routinely and speak to one another about, you know, how you, just as we had a conversation that we're having at the moment, it's so valuable because we can all learn a little bit from one another as to how we've engaged with minority communities. You know, there are different ways, and I've heard several different ways today, and that is really good. So just to let you know, the society is moving on that one, because I think, you know, I hear it so much, you know, from Brazil, from Canada, from, and our New Zealand and Australian group, the ANZ group, are bringing in a group from the Philippines, from the Pacific Islanders, I beg your pardon, Pacific Islanders, who are joining later this year. And so that discussion I've been having with Beverly Mulhauser, who's the lead of the ANZ group, and how we're going to engage with them. Well, one of the problems, they don't have internet connection, which is very good in the Pacific Islands. So I was saying, well, maybe, you know, DOHaD can get together and provide a satellite dish. It's something like that, which might actually be helpful just to engage people with the community. But then in terms of the research, obviously, the practicalities, we've got some very good people working in Australia and New Zealand with Indigenous communities, and I think it would be great to bring everybody together. Cristiane, you have another comment?
Just to follow Fabiola, in Brazil, in the last decade, we started a program in the universities, and now we have reserved spots for minorities. In fact, it's not minority because more than 50% of Brazilian, are from it's African descendants. But now we have in the graduation and in the post-graduation too, at least 30% of the spots reserved to African descendants and indigenous people. And in my university, we have received some indigenous students, and now we have the first nurses, and they have to study in the university and then return to their society to improve the health in their society. I think this is really, really, really important, because if they have to compete in the universal spot, it's really difficult to enter in the universities in Brazil. We have a huge competition. So it's one of the programs.
In the United Kingdom, we are deliberately recruiting medical students from ethnic minorities, and it is working really well. I mean, I have several students who I have pastoral tutorial responsibilities for and get to know them very well. A woman from Syria who's brilliant. She's now qualified. She's gone back to work in her community in the East End of London. As I said, it's just, you can see she just understands them. And it is so important to midwives. Again, as you know, people saying, if you're a black woman and you're a large black woman and you're faced with a very thin Caucasian midwife, you might not listen too much to them. And it is actually having the right people as health professionals is very important. Thank you very much. Rahat, the last comment on this question, we'll move on. Yeah. Sorry, you're on.
I'm really thoroughly, fascinated by the input of people from various parts of the world, and I really wanted to touch upon Maria's comment which she made regarding respect. So I think trust, when we talk about trust, the trusting relationships comes through respect. And I think we in our towers, we often we think about the university, and we think about the educated people, and we think about what we think is the right thing to do, and what we think is the right approach, or what the right problems to address. So I think that, Lucilla, you spoke about the diversity and the representation from the communities. Mm-hmm. So we feel that that we have tried. I don't think we have been absolutely successful, but we try that when we are approaching our research, we spend more time in the planning, the planning of the thing with the community. Yeah. And this is something that is very difficult to do, not easy to do. That especially when you're going into a community and you're planning some kind of research, the way you're going to do the research, even the tools that you're going to use. they are going to be heavily influenced by the community's perception of different, the way you ask a question, the way you approach a problem, the problems that you're going to talk about. So along with the, including medical students, including, you know, from different sectors, including educated women, you know, who are representative of different communities. Along with that, I think the actual people of the community are the key also for formulating your plans, your projects, the way that you are going to conduct.
Yes, I think one thing which is very important, which has certainly happened in the United Kingdom, is our funders of research absolutely insist that you detail exactly how you're going to do this now. So half of your application form is taken up with what we call patient public involvement and engagement, PPIE. But you know, everybody knows about PPIE in the UK, but that's essentially what we're talking about. And so you have to put in great detail how you're going to engage. And one thing that we have done so we work in prematurity research, we work in research in obesity and diabetes, and we have patient groups for each of those different conditions. So people who've lived the experience of diabetes in pregnancy or premature birth, and every time we plan a study in that area, we ask for their involvement. So sometimes we do it online. Sometimes we do it in person. They enjoy coming along actually in the evening or on the weekend. And then we pass by our information that we want to participate. So the consent forms and so on, they will write the consent forms with us. Actually, we ask them, it's co-design, is what we call it. And they write the consent forms and the patient information leaflets with us. And we never start a study without these groups having seen these forms as we go along. It's hugely successful, and it's you wonder why on earth you didn't always do it once you've done this, because they bring in a completely different perspective, and you think, oh my goodness, why didn't I think about that? Of course, that's obvious, we should have done that. And again, about the language you use, and particularly working with women with obesity, we have to be extremely careful. Of course, we have to be extremely careful not to offend. And then they will suggest the ways we might approach people. And then we relay that to the midwives or the consenting nurses or whatever. So it's revolutionized research in the United Kingdom because the funders are insisting on it. So maybe in your own countries, you might feed back and say, this is something which we have to put into every single grant application that we do, is how we engage with the population. And they have people from lay people on all the committees. I sit on the Committee for Diabetes UK, and we have 4 lay representatives who scrutinize every single application and interview you if you come to an interview, to tell them how you're going to engage with everybody, and it makes such a difference. So thank you very much. That's I think a very enlightening discussion. I hope for those listening, it gives you some ideas as to what you might do in your own communities, because engagement with our populations, our target populations, are probably the most important thing we can do to do successful research in DOHaD. Absolutely the most important thing. So we have a question here in this from Samantha. In this society, in a position to guide, support underrepresented individuals through application processes, including assembling powerful, is the society in a position to, I'm going to start again. Is the International Society basically in a position to guide, support underrepresented individuals through application processes, including assembling powerful resumes, personal statements, etc.? It's great to have positions set aside for these applicants, but they're not professionally developed enough to submit competitive applications. How many amazing applicants are being overlooked because their applications look poor? This is a very good point. Often these forms are the first opportunity to be assessed and make it to the next step. So also support that maybe can come with a small scholarship, so that they can set aside time outside to work, fill in application. Now, this is something that I want to hear about, is what we can do to get people in a position where they are competitive for applications. And we see it so many times, not with the little applications that we have within DOHaD for workshops and so on, but how about us, and what we're doing at the moment is doing quite a lot of short courses. How about a short course on how to write a good resume, a good CV? How about a short course on how to make your first application for research funding? I think that's a great idea, because we are in a position to be able to do that. we're doing a lot on training at the moment. In fact, I've got a meeting in a couple of weeks' time, a brainstorming meeting about exactly this. How can we help people develop across different countries by providing some training? So we're starting off, it's not relevant to this conversation, but with a course on qualitative research methodologies, which is very important now. If you're planning to talk to women in your groups as you go along, and you'd want to do some qualitative research, structured interviews and so on, we will be having a course as to how you can do that, because most applications now for global health in our country require you to do some qualitative and quantitative research, i.e. you're talking. So thank you for that, Samantha. That's a fantastic suggestion, and we will certainly think about that. Thank you. So Maria.
Yes, I think probably this related with Samantha's question on how the society can support all this work. And I remember my times when I was a young scientist, well, in the making, new to Canada, barely learning how to write in English, and how important was for me to have three things: one, mentorship, networking opportunities, and support for career development. Yeah. So I needed, and I was lucky to have, wonderful women and men that were mentors and didn't mind to look at my horrible English and with much patience go and learn me how, and I learned how to successfully write in English. Exactly. And things like, I mean, I am a scientist that work now in the North, but I always have in mind my Global South colleagues that are absolutely fantastic. And sometimes because of barriers in terms of language, in terms of opportunities, is kind of missing generation and generations of talented people. So I think the International Society has done a lot of work in this area with the webinars around the world. But I believe, for example, creating some mentorship opportunities of, between people that are working in established universities with trainees from the Global South, for example, to guide them how to navigate these systems. It's something that, kind of buddies program or something like that.
We could do that, and quite a few societies do that. I mean, I belong to some societies in the UK which provide mentorship, that you have a mentorship team and they will provide support. I think that's a great idea, actually, Maria, and certainly something that we could set up and talk to the council about at our next meeting. I'd be delighted to do that. I do think it would be a good idea. We could do a course on writing a CV. I've done that before, actually. I one of the DOHaD meetings, I did a CV writing course, and the last meeting I did a networking session with the trainees, which I think was well received. And it's quite easy to suggest how you might start networking, but it's not intuitive.
Because we were all there, everybody in this panel, and maybe a lot of senior colleagues in the that are attending. We were all there in a point in which we had no idea how to put together a CV, in which we had no idea how to write a grant application. We had no idea how to write a paper. So it's a little bit of passing the torch to the next.
Yes, well, we can. These are really super. I'm writing all these down, these suggestions. Thank you very much. And Cristiane.
I agree 100% with Maria. And if I can say something to Samantha, don't be ashamed. Write to great science. Maybe someone will identify with your history and would help you. And I think in the global meetings, in the world meetings, we can open a space to connect mentors and mentored students.
I think that's a very good idea to have it at the congresses, but we can do that, and we did do a bit of that last time. There was meet the professor and that sort of thing, and meet people. I think there's something we could do continuously, because it's a long gap between these congresses, and this is what I'm trying to fill in at the moment, because I'm very conscious of that gap. Very much the society has gone from one congress and then dipped down and back up to the next, and this is absolutely my presidency. I don't want that to happen. I think we want to maintain continuity. So I can think of several ways we might do this, and we will build it up. Thank you very much, and that's very, very helpful suggestion. Rahat. Sorry, you're on mute still, Rahat.
So I think the points that have just been made are all very, very amazing points. And I think there's not enough that one can do to support and to help people to succeed. So I'm speaking from the perspective of my own journey, my own professional journey. And so I'm pretty fortunate actually that after my training in UK, I've spent about almost 35 plus years in my universities. And I've seen medical students, I've seen them progress through their lives, and I've seen some of them now become absolute shining, brilliant stars internationally.
Yeah.
And I think that impressions that are made at a very young age, especially when you're a medical student or you're in training, I think those are the impressions that can change people's lives. And I'm talking now about professionals. It can inspire them, it can motivate them, it can help them to develop their relationships, their networking. And I feel that with all the things that have been mentioned, which are all equally important, I think traveling scholarships for young people, who have not really made their absolute decisions about their lives, but who are showing interest and who are indicating their interest and who are demonstrating their interest through actual work. I think if we gave them a much more immersive experience of learning in different backgrounds, I think that would really help to shape the leaders of the future.
So we do have these brain mobility awards, very strange name, but I mean, this is exactly what it is. It's to enable people to have traveling scholarships. We've only had one application in the last few months, so we're just about to send it out again as an advertisement. But they cost money, so we can only afford a few every year. But as I hope we will increase our income by various strategies, these traveling scholarships are incredibly valuable. I mean, last year we had somebody from Brazil who went to work in Cambridge University with Dino Giussani, and that was a great success. So, this is a life-changing experience for people, absolutely life-changing. And if you're motivated that you can really kick off, I benefited from that. When I was 20, I went to stay with some, and I just wrote to people. I didn't know them. I was unbelievably sort of arrogant. It was me as a young student saying, "Hello, I'm Lucilla Poston. Can I come and stay in your lab? I've read your paper on so-and-so." And it was amazing how nice people were. I went down to Miami. I remember to an amazing guy, Murray Epstein, who was just fantastic, and had me for a week to stay in the lab. It was absolutely transformational. And I think particularly at that age, when you're an undergraduate too, and you're just deciding what you want, where you want to go, to have lab visits. And I was fortunate because I got a grant from the British Council that paid for me to go and do that. So the opportunities, but it's the cost and the providing those burses and fellowships. So I agree, and please encourage people to apply for these. We don't have enough applicants. And we will fix them up. So, and we will hopefully have more. So thank you very much for that. Now, I'd like to move on because that was a great conversation. Thank you very much, everybody. There is one comment here. There's somebody saying rigorous design forms. I think that's forms are mostly complicated for our patients. So the situation around me makes me feel that clinical healthcare professionals and researchers are a little bit separate. We were talking about this early on. Fabiola was saying, any strategies to promote the effective and purposeful full cycle engagement in studies. So what people are saying, what this attendee is saying is that it's really difficult to bridge that gap between healthcare professionals and the patients and understanding what you're doing. And I think, early on we had that discussion. If you don't engage with your communities and you don't engage in the right way with the communities, they don't understand what you're doing, you're lost. So we were discussing, and I don't know whether you missed this person who wrote this, but we were discussing many ways in which we might integrate with the communities. First of all, as Rahat was saying, you spend 6 months or more when you're designing a study working just on the communities, nothing to do with the study. You set the scene, you pave the way for the study to be successful. The more, in my experience, the more time spent doing that, the more likely your study is to be successful and people be engaged all the way through and not drop out. But the time spent at the beginning is incredibly important. And again, we mentioned having meetings with the health professionals who will be involved so that they're totally understanding of what you're trying to do, even though they may not be involved in the study, they're working with the patients. Fabiola.
Well, it's a great question. Great questions. I think the first answer, I don't know, is the first but more important. You need to have a group that connect, or the group is connected with the research, assistance and research. I think it's very, very important for clinical research, because we need to answer and put questions with a high frequency. Understand? We need to connect with the patients, not just for research, because it is not possible for the patient to separate the research or the clinical follow-up, especially when I think, for example, in my area, preterm infants, the research is totally connected with the follow-up of the baby. So we needed to maintain your group, you and your group, connection with the family, connection with social media, connection with WhatsApp, connection with forms. I don't know exactly, but it's like I have a lot of students, graduate students that have the objective of the work is maintain the connection with the research patients, understand? Because it is very, very important. The confidence and connection, it's very important to maintain the clinical or the follow-up in the clinical studies. I believe in the questions. In my country, in Brazil, it's not so easy to talk, for example, in a meeting with the patients. It's not easy.
No, no.
It's very difficult, depends the level of education. The best way is, of course, the internet and small groups with the healthcare professionals that the family knows or believe. Yeah. I think it's the way.
And having small groups when people's peer support within a group is very, very important. We used to run sessions with ladies all together, lifestyle sessions, but the fact they all together, they formed WhatsApp groups, they formed groups where they talk to each other, they get to know one another, that gives them confidence to engage. And I couldn't emphasize more how those sort of groupings rather than individual sessions with people, group sessions are very, very informative, and you're far more likely to get engagement because they learn from one another.
And just to complete, family with families.
Families with families.
Together with families. Yeah. Family in the last part of the study, and family starts the follow-up or start the cohort is very important. I think this families with families, it's a good way to improve the engagement.
Yeah. There's a question come in. Thank you very much, Fabiola. Many granting international organizations are asking, this is from Paolo, who you know. Hi, Paula. Many granting international organizations are asking applicants to describe how the grant is considering gender equity. We could consider these aspects in our society's activities. I couldn't agree more, Paula. We are incredibly keen to engage representative people, gender, not just gender, but ethnic groups, and that is why we're having an EDI chair who will come into council and supervise everything that we do and scrutinize that what we do is equitable. And that we have proper representation. And as I say, you know, with 9 different regional groups, we are in a fantastic position to do this and to show to the world that we can achieve this trans-globally. So thank you, Paula. We must do that. And so once we've appointed a chair, nobody's applied yet, so I'm not targeting anybody here, but if you'd like to, I'd be delighted to have your application. And then it will be that chair who brings together a small group as a subcommittee. They don't have to be on council, they can be drawn from people who are interested. That's what we want to plan. So that then represent the EDI across all of its greater meaning within the society. So please think about that if anybody would like to do that, and then we will get a subcommittee together quickly. We are changing the structure of the council so it fits more what we're trying to do. We've got a new education applications have been received from our new education development lead, and that's going to be slightly different. It's not just education, it's going to be professional development. And we're going to think more exactly the sort of things we've been talking about here, about writing CVs, about writing applications. That will be the remit of that chair and the committee that chair represents. So we've done nearly an hour, so we've only done a couple of questions, but I'd just like to have a quick whip round the group about one thing which is very important, and I think very variable across the world, is what happens when people go on maternity leave. So if I could just ask you all to just give a little short resume about what your country does in your own situation. So Fabiola, you're first on my screen. If you wouldn't mind just telling us what happens and what the problems are, if there are any.
Yes, in Brazil we have maternity leave 6 months for regular professional and postgraduate too in internship. So I think 6 months of maternity leave, if you compare with other countries, I think is not a bad number, a bad time, but it's a challenge because when you come back, the place that you work at is not totally prepared to receive a woman with a young children, but we have a maternity leave.
Right, that's quite forward. I mean, it has to be said, England used to be in the dark ages when it came, as we say, when it came to maternity leave. And I'm pleased to say that we have been made to change very much so. Xiao, what about Singapore?
Hi, we can look at it in two perspectives. One is from the researcher perspective. As a PI, if my staff goes on maternity, which is typically 4 months in Singapore, I have to pay it out of my research grants. The institution doesn't reimburse, and that means the work doesn't get done and the grant gets drained. So that's quite tough. From the participant perspective, especially when it comes to collecting breast milk, it's difficult to achieve 6 months of exclusive breastfeeding. And even when we collect breast milk for research, by the time they get to 3-4 months, they've stopped breastfeeding because they've got to go back to work. So those are two specific hurdles that we face here in Singapore.
Thank you. I mean, it's incredibly important what you say about research grants, because we still actually do have that problem to a degree, although now maternity leave will be covered. But it also, if somebody's doing something which they only have the skill for, a research fellow who's doing something quite, peculiar to their skill base, it's very difficult to recruit somebody in for that period of time to actually take that over. And then if you do, you also have the problem of whose research that is then. So that has to be on the understanding that they're going to hand that research back to the person when they come back from maternity leave. So we always make that very clear. You will become an author on the paper, but actually this is so-and-so's research project. This is primarily their research project. You're doing maternity leave cover, but of course you will be involved in the final publications and so on. We have had some problems about that when people have come back, relied too much on that other person still being around, and they feel that it's their own project. So it's incredibly important, I think, to make it very clear. But if you don't have somebody with the same skill base, or you can't actually, well, how do you do the project? So does the project go into abeyance? I mean, I don't think anybody's ever sorted this out anywhere really well. It brings up so many different complications for both parties, for the person who's covering for maternity leave if you do get somebody, but if you don't, then you have to pay somebody out of the grant, and the grant then ends prematurely without the research being done. So I don't know what the answer to that is, but it's a common problem. Cristiane,
I think
sorry,
the institutions need to have a separate part for maternity leave, so we don't have to pay it out of our grant funding, and our grantors need to extend the length of our grants to allow that.
Our university now does that. They didn't, but they do that now. Yeah, Cristiane.
So just to add something, that what Fabiola said, here in Brazil, in my university, when you have the maternity leave, you have some colleague that will take the classes for you, so it's not a problem with the classes. But in the post-graduation, no one will help you. So if you have master, PhD, postdoc students, you have to attend them even remotely during the maternity leave with a newborn. So it's really, really, really hard. This moment's really hard. And when we return to the university, we have the classes, we have administration duties to do. So, and like the funding agencies doesn't extend your deadline. So if you have a project of 4 years, it's 4 years.
Really?
If you,
No extension of
yes,
deadline?
yes, they didn't extend. So if you want, you have to ask and justify, and they can extend, but not like automatically. No, you have to ask, put a justification, and they decide if you will extend or not. So it's really, really, really hard. And one of the problems after the 6 months, okay, you can have the vacation too, so it will be 7, 8 months. But when we return, like in my university, we don't have a nursery. We don't have a good environment for a child, like a place for breastfeeding or for diaper change. It's really, really hard.
Never suited for women, absolutely. And you know, just to the other end of that spectrum, just to give you an example, we do the funding bodies in the UK do suspend the project, and maternity leave is paid for. And people take advantage of this. Now, this is not talking against women, but I've had one student who's had 3 children during the period of her fellowship because they've all been paid for. And it's the longest ever fellowship that I've ever had. So the longest ever PhD, but it was all completely, she actually did really well in the end. But and people do see research fellowships as an opportunity to have their children. And so that is the issue, because they know they will be paid for, and I can't blame them, because when else do you do it? You know, we have to try and accommodate it. But that is the other side of it. When we are relaxed and we do support them, then people can say, well, this is the time when I'm going to come out of clinical practice and have my children when I'm doing my research fellowship. So it's not to be discouraged, but it is in a way taking advantage of the system. So I don't know how we deal. We haven't ever been able to deal with that in any satisfactory way, but we just had to put up with it and do the best we can. So Maria, would you like to comment?
Yeah, so in Canada, universities are kind of required to comply with the Employment Standards Act of the respective provinces, and that gives kind of a minimum standards for maternity and parental leave. So for example, under this program, the eligible person can take up to 15 weeks of maternity leave, and then in addition to the maternity leave, they can add 35 weeks of parental leave. So I would say is enough time. It's a lot of time. However, this comes with, not all the, of course, 100% of the salary being paid. I have had not personal experiences with this, but I have the experience of actually a colleague and a junior, an early career investigator that used to be a postdoc with me that is in this call, that we struggle, my goodness, so much in terms of how universities manage the grants for postdoctoral fellows to be able to access to these benefits, especially when they get a scholarship. Not all the grants or the scholarships that are obtained by postdoctoral fellows and PhD students and grad students do the best for trainees in terms of supporting maternity leave. I think there are many ways in which, and this is not only in Canada, but everywhere, that our institutions should accommodate maternity leave by not only in terms of the weeks, but also plan and delegating work. Many of these things are in our own hands as PIs in our own labs, like having flexible work arrangements, supporting everything in terms of how this person is going to return to work, and supporting that transition back to work after maternity leave, I think is very important, because the person has been for almost, an extended period of time, probably not talking about much science, and then going back and taking back the work responsibilities. That takes a lot of support. But
that support, in my experience, putting a lot of support in is really worth it, because you develop loyalties with that person. I mean, some of my best senior staff now were people I supported through 2 or 3 pregnancies, flexible working time, helping write papers when they weren't there. And it's paid off. You don't do it for that reason, but of course it's paid off enormously because of the loyalty which is engendered. And these people, that they know about time management more than anybody else. When you've had 2 or 3 children and you're also trying to balance an academic job, you manage your time really well. And then they come back into, you know, full time later on when they're senior lecturers and professors even. They are the most efficient people I've ever had. So
and having flexible work arrangements,
yeah.
really, I mean, it would be absolutely
Investment.
nonsensical in the area of work that we do if we don't apply in our own shops all these principles.
And it is worth from everybody's point of view, the family, the mother, the long-term employment of that person is absolutely worth concentrating on, to providing as much support as possible. We have some rather sad tales in the chat here in the questions and answers. I'm from Uruguay and my maternity leave is 1.5 months. And then someone from the United States, I had only 4 weeks of paid maternity leave during my postdoc. It was impossible to take more time because my family depended on my salary. That's a common issue. Exclusive breastfeeding for 6 months, no way, it was impossible. And as somebody mentioned, you know, as you said, Xiao, nobody ever manages to breastfeed. I mean, the United Kingdom, they all come back to work at about 6 months, so they have to wean at about 4. And you know, the idea about the WHO breastfeeding, exclusive breastfeeding, goes completely out of the window because of the workplace. And we don't provide adequate facilities to enable women to carry on breastfeeding. You know, there we're all, you know, as DOHaD, we're all promoting this, and a childhood obesity forum I was doing the other day, everybody's got to breastfeed for 6 months. You know, the comment was made, this is not practically what actually happens. And it doesn't happen because of the issue with the workplace and the way that people are forced back to work, but so on. It's an answer. I'd love to carry on with this conversation because I think across the world we could actually get a document together amongst DOHaD researchers about the different workplace experiences, and that could be something we could publish in the DOHaD. I'd love to do that. Here's Deb saying, could we get together and write an opinion piece? Just what I'm saying, Deb. Great mind, she's trained me well. Published in DOHaD about maternity. I think that would be an absolutely great idea. So let's take that one away, Pauline, and write an opinion piece about that, because it is critically important. Nobody's got the answer. Nobody has an answer. There's some better practice than others, but there's some awful practice going on as well. We will publish it.
But Lucilla, I would also add, not only during maternity leave, but in the first 1,000 days of a child, because, you know, let's say there's the excuse during the maternity leave that is legal, but then what? Then is like how much support researchers in their own groups can give to mothers of young children.
I must say, this is one thing the pandemic has improved. I mean, in the United Kingdom and elsewhere, I know, because flexible working became normal practice. And I think it's hugely advantaged women with small children, because they can, when they come for interview now, the first thing they say is, do you do flexible working? Can I work from home 2 days a week? We found that working from home 2 days a week is super good, super efficient, especially for people with young children. They, you know, it couldn't be better for them. And they can pick their children up, take their children to kindergarten, pick them up in the evening. They can do that within a working day because they're at home. And that benefits the family, benefits everybody. And it's created a completely new, different perspective. So I think, you know, the best thing that's come out of the horrible pandemic has been that we have developed a new way of working for young mothers with children. And I mean, that is something that we could write in an opinion piece as well, because it's transformed society in the United Kingdom and across Europe and elsewhere. And I expect in your countries too, but it is the best thing that's ever happened to and, you know, families who have people looking after their elderly parents. It applies the same. It's not just for, and particularly women who are doing that. It's not just people with small children, people with disabled children too, people who have to take time out to take their partners, whatever, to hospital appointments, you know. And I haven't had one person who's abused the system, not one. In my school, which has got 600 employees, there is not one person who's abused that system and taken advantage of it. So, I mean, I am completely supportive of flexible working, and it's been proven now beyond doubt. So everybody, ladies, I should say, I was going to say ladies and gentlemen, but we are an exclusively ladies group, I think. Rather nice, isn't it? Thank you very much indeed. I hope that those of you listening have enjoyed that conversation. We've got about 6 questions that we were going to talk about we haven't even touched, but I don't think that matters in the slightest because we've had such an excellent discussion. You've given me great ideas for some of the things that the DOHaD Society can do. I've mentioned the EDI chair, which is vacant. Please somebody apply because we need to get on with that. We can think about doing some networking, short courses, mentorship. As Elena Zambrano said, that maybe the DOHaD Society could organize something similar to the STEM group that the British Council organized for Mexico and Peru. Yes, Elena, I can be in touch with you about that because I think it's a great idea about mentorship and about the STEM disciplines. So we must go, but thank you so much, all of you. Great discussants, really great. And I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you. I've met most of you before, but actually to sit and chat with you has been really illuminating. And I think this society can do a lot in this area, practically speaking, going forward. So thank you very much, everybody who's been listening. Now it's time for us to go to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning in the United Kingdom. And the rest of you have a good rest of day, morning, wherever you are. And thank you so much for attending. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you. And thank you, Pauline.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.